The low differential Pearl symmetric sensor is going to be the absolute cherry on top of what has been a spectacular year of releases in the track lineup. Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. Brian Buckosh here, core design engineer for Brunswick Bowling, and today we're talking about the release of the brand new sensor Pearl from Track. I'm also going to talk about the rest of the current lineup for the Track 2022 calendar year. I've done Track a complete disservice by not updating my videos as the new releases come out, because this is arguably one of Track's strongest performance lineups ever, if not the strongest performance lineup that Track has ever had. And I have not been able to catch up on my videos. I've been busy doing videos for the other brands, but more than that, doing the behind-the-scenes work for the core design engineering for a number of the brands of Brunswick. And of course, our R&D team as a whole has been really hard at work bringing some new core and chem developments to the brands, including Track Bowling. So be excited for the future, but be really excited for the lineup right now. And because I haven't been able to keep you guys updated on this lineup, I'm going to do an extended version of this video where in the chart section, I'm going to go through each of the releases for the 2022 calendar year and give you a little more insight about them as I work through how they fit with each other and could possibly fit into your arsenal. So go ahead and check you can seek through, look at the chapter tabs, chapter headings, and they're also in the description if you want to find something in particular. But we're going to start with this brand new sensor Pearl. Of course, this one is wrapped with a brand new core. It's called the regulator core, and it's a low differential core. It's got a fairly medium RG at 249, so it's going to be fairly medium in terms of the rate at which it revs up, so it's going to read the late mid lane. Aided in length by its pearlized cover stock, but it's a 034 total differential core, with total differential being the main controlling factor for flare potential. That means this ball is not going to flare a whole lot. So that's going to aid a little bit in the length of the ball, but it's also going to keep you with a controlled hard arcing back end motion. It's not going to go too sideways on you, despite the fact that it has a pearlized cover stock. And just a quick word on the design elements of this regulator core. It's actually got two main component features. It's got this real thick midband that you see in the middle of the core body. That's very reminiscent of the Paragon series. Although in this ball it's a single density inner, it doesn't have the dual density inner of the Paragon. The shape and the volume of that band is actually very similar to the shape and volume of the Paragon series band. It also has a two-tiered core body outside of the band that looks a lot like the Strata series ball. So it's kind of a combination of those wrapped into a symmetrical package, which means that about the pin axis, all the average of the masses come out to be 0. This core has dynamic core in the outer core. That's the blue stuff that you see when you drill into it. That means that it's going to have harder hitting power relative to our regular white material that we used to use, because it's a higher strength to weight ratio material, a little more expensive, but a little more hitting power at the pin, so it's worth it. And all of that is wrapped in a DR6 pearlized cover stock. Now this is not a perfectly new formula. This is actually a formula that we've used before on previous Track releases, but not since back in the EBI days have we used this particular pearlized formula. I believe it was on some of the Kinetic releases, and it was also on maybe like a Track Heat Ultraviolet or one of the previous Track Heat releases. But we've brought it back. It was a really good core cover matchup for this to give you good length, easy through the fronts, and a nice change of direction without being too flippy or too erratic, because we want this to be kind of like an all-purpose medium to dry lane control ball. And I think all of these elements combined with the compounded finish are exactly what Track fans are looking for to kind of round out the end of their bag. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to take you right to the comparison chart, and as I said, we're going to look at all of the releases in the current Track lineup. Meet the new comparison chart, same as the old Track comparison chart in terms of function. I've just updated it graphically to fill the screen a little better, give you some bolder colors, and just make it overall more easy to read so that it's just a better user experience for you guys. But in terms of how it operates, it's exactly the same as the previous chart. All the bowling balls are sorted by oil volume that they're built to handle, with the heaviest oil balls on the right side of the chart down to the lightest oil balls on the left side of the chart. And they're also sorted by response to friction, with the sharpest responding balls toward the top of the chart and the smoothest responding balls toward the bottom of the chart. Now, Track has the tall task of having to fill out an entire arsenal with just about 6 releases year over year. So they have to make do with filling big voids with really versatile products, since they don't get as many launches as some of the other brands do. And I feel like they've done a really great job of balancing the releases. And right now I'm going to show you exactly why. What we have right here are 3 shiny balls: the Sensor Pearl, the Kinetic Black Ice, and the Paragon Hybrid. And we've got 3 sanded balls in the current lineup: the Paragon Solid, the Stealth, and the Legion Solid. And of course, you can count the 4th is the Track Heat, which is the carryover from last year's calendar year. But more than that, we've got a really nice division of symmetry right now too. We've got 3 symmetrical balls in the current lineup, with the Stealth, the Heat, and the Sensor, 2 mildly asymmetrical balls with the Kinetic Black Ice and the Legion Solid, and 2 highly asymmetrical balls in the Paragon and the Paragon Hybrid. So with all of these range of options, they've done a lot with a little, and it is a very complete and very versatile arsenal top to bottom. I'm going to talk only briefly about the Paragon Solid because it's in a release video with the Track Heat Ultraviolet from about a year ago. If you want more information on these 2 balls, make sure you go check out my video on that. It's also in the Track Bowling playlist for 2022. Of course, the Paragon reigns king at the top of the track lineup with a really strong mid lane core added by that 2 density inner core of the iCore 3.0. It obviously tractions early and tractions often. It's a early mid lane reading ball that blends out the back end without being too quitty or too forward on the back of the lane, and because of that it's still seeing some playing time in a lot of our pro staff's arsenal. If you want to step down from that, we've got 2 options for you. The symmetrical Stealth is a little closer in motion to the Paragon, just in terms of the smooth blendiness of the motion of that core, aided by the strong mid lane motion generated by the donut on the bottom of that core. This Stealth is a decent step down from the Paragon, but it also offers a little more back-end whip, a little more back-end motion for a strong sanded solid, and it was one of the first of many strong sanded solid by our brands that have kind of taken a step up in performance in 2022. I think the Stealth really turned heads, and even though it flew under the radar, another pun intended, I do think that the Stealth is still really useful for a lot of people as their top-end symmetrical ball, being a sanded solid. If you need a little more punch at the back of the lane, but you still want to stick in the solid category, then the Track Legion Solid is a perfect option for you. It obviously is built to handle a similar amount of medium heavy oil volume that the Stealth is built to handle, although it gets through the lane just a little bit better with a sharper change of direction at the back of the lane. This is going to be a little more suited to open up some of those easier conditions for you. If you're bowling on something that has a little more extreme wet dry and has a big puddle in the middle, the control of the Stealth might be your bet. But if you have a slightly blended or tapered left to right pattern where you can really stand in the middle, kind of stand left, throw right, and you have good forgiveness at the back of the pattern, the Legion Solid is going to be amazing on the fresh oil for its bounce and recovery, and it still has a chance with its sanded cover stock to kind of pick up the mid lane on those misses inside and give you a good chance at going through the pocket well and carrying some of those corners on your misses. So all told, very punchy, surprising strong back-end motion for a sanded solid out of the Legion Solid, albeit maybe a little weaker than the other 2 balls that I just mentioned. And if you're looking for a little more length and change of direction at the back of the lane, that's the perfect segue to talk about the Paragon Hybrid. The Paragon Hybrid is a transition. We just talked about 3 sanded balls, but this is the first compounded ball that we're going to talk about on the list. The Paragon Hybrid is currently the most angular ball in the track lineup, but I still think it has a characteristic blendiness associated with it. That iCore 3.0 has that dual density band in it, and that high density middle band wants to help the core rev up earlier. It has a really high flare potential aided by the really high differential, and so this ball wants to rev early and often, and that high density band wants to kind of take over the mid lane and helps the mid lane dig. So even though this one is compounded, I think it does a really good job of seeing the mid lane without missing it and getting too clean through it. Because of that, it maybe sacrifices just a little bit of sharpness that some of the other balls categorically in our brands do have on the back of the lane, but it certainly doesn't lack for back end motion. I think it's a really fair trade-off. And being a hybrid, it wasn't going to be the absolute snappiest ball to begin with, but even though it's not the sharpest back end that we own, it does not quit on the back of the lane. It gives you good security in the mid lane with that hard charging back end motion, making this one versatile and playable on some fresh oil conditions, but really I think has high utility as the first transition ball when you want to step in and open up the lane and bounce it off of some of the developing friction in the mid lane. It really shines. As a step down from the Paragon Hybrid, it's a real natural progression just to go right into the Kinetic Black Ice. The Kinetic Black Ice has just a little bit of intermediate differential, making it lightly asymmetrical before you drill it, becomes more asymmetrical after you drill it, starts at 0.006 and goes up to 16 or 18 for a standard pinup layout. Kinetic Black Ice is going to be noticeably cleaner than the Paragon Hybrid, with a slightly rounder but still punchy change of direction at the back of the lane. This ball's a little closer to symmetrical. It kind of bridges that gap between the ASIMs and the SIMs perfectly, but more than that, the step down in cover stock to the QR7 cover stock that's on this Kinetic Black Ice is going to make a big difference in the length that you see out of this ball. So this one's going to be easy length and a very chargy, punchy change of direction. Again, just like the Paragon Hybrid, I don't think this is necessarily a sharp back-end motion. It doesn't have enough asymmetry built into it to be characteristically sharp, but it does not quit on the back of the lane, and the compounded finish means that it's going to see the lane where you want the ball to read at the late mid lane into the back-end transition, not going to read at your feet, and it's going to make good shape overall on those medium to medium light oil conditions. If you want something with just a little more control, then I'm going to steer you toward the brand new sensor, highlighted in yellow to give the indication that this is the new release. The sensor, of course, comes with this brand new lower differential and slightly more medium RG core that is the regulator core. So this one doesn't have as much flare potential as any of the balls that I've named, so that's going to aid in the natural length of this ball, although the medium RG does help it pick up the late mid lane enough that it doesn't go through it. It actually, in my opinion, reads the lane a little bit earlier and a little bit more predictably than the Kinetic Black Ice. The Kinetic Black Ice gets a little cleaner through it. I think the Kinetic Black Ice does make a slightly sharper change of direction, more abrupt change of direction once it sees the friction, where the sensor sees it a little earlier and starts rounding it out. And again, these differences are subtle. The box finishes are nearly identical, so the differences are the cover strength and of course the flare potential of this ball in terms of where they start to read the mid lane. And I do feel that sensor picks it up just a little sooner, but just because it has more of an arcing characteristic change of direction, it's just going to be a little more controllable. But I also think that also potentially makes it a little more versatile as well, where the Kinetic Black Ice can be a little over under and a little jumpy at times. The sensor just has a better time of blending it out, rounding it out, continuing through the pins in a manner that you aren't surprised and the moves are a little more predictable. So I'm going to go into a little more detail, since this is what this video is about where this ball fits in terms of player style. If you're a high rev player, you can act like this ball is higher on the chart in terms of oil volume, and you can put this as like your benchmark symmetrical ball. It has low flare potential, but it reads the mid lane in the right part of the lane, and the back end continuation is just beautiful and predictable. As a high rev player, whether it be a two-handed player, a no thumb player, or just a high rev one-hander, you will see a lot of versatility on a lot of medium patterns, and you can transition with this ball in and open up the lane without worrying about it getting too soft, and the reaction at the back of the lane will keep coming for you. That's the thing that I've noticed about the sensor. If you're a more matched player, I think you can slot it in your bag as that second transition ball on more medium stuff, or a third transition ball if you bowl on a lot of oil volume. And if you're a high speed player, the sensor is going to be an excellent substitution for some of those weaker diff balls that you usually maybe can't use, like when the high rev or the matched players are picking up maybe entry-level balls from other brands, your beasts, your twists, your rhinos, on those really dry conditions. This is an option that gives you that low differential, low flare potential that those balls offer, but has a higher performance cover with more change of direction at the back of the lane. It's going to give you an option to compete with some of those entry-level balls on some more burned conditions and not feel like the ball is not dynamic enough. This one definitely has the technology and the punch at the back of the lane that as a high-speed player, I'm not so afraid to pick it up. And of course, if you're an extremely high-speed player, you can always cut the box finish to give you a little bit of earlier mid-lane traction to help round out the back of the lane and not miss it. Track certainly goes for quality over quantity in terms of the number of releases that they've got, and I think they're doing a lot with a little with the number of releases that they have. They have one of the most versatile and arguably one of the best lineups that they've ever had in the history of track bowling right now. And I want to hear from you guys who are the loyal track fans. Is this the best lineup that track's ever had in terms of performance ball motion? Or is there a particular year that you guys point to that's like, no, that lineup was unbeatable looking at the track balls that came out that year? So I want to hear it from you guys. Is it this year or is it a previous year? What is your favorite track lineup? But in the meantime, don't forget, the sensor is available now, along with all of the balls that we just talked about. Hopefully, if you don't have them in your bag already, I gave you some really good insight about how they might slot into your bag, into the rest of your arsenal for you. And I really feel like these balls are strong, versatile performers, and I think you should have probably more than one track ball in your bag at this point, considering how good this year's lineup is. They're available now in your local pro shop, and since you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook pages, Bowling Buckosh, where I do my best to keep you guys up to date on all of the releases from the brands of Brunswick. Until next time, thanks for watching.